Well, welcome everybody. We have a repeat uh, presentation by Dale Klein tonight about the time of use rates, which can befuddle many of us, especially the DTE rates. And but first, I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. And I'm sure those who are here, probably have lots of questions for Dale. And I need to thank our sponsors, the State Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, EGLE, Homeland Solar, McNaught and McKay, Iron Ridge Racking, Harvest Solar, and Sri Energy. I know most of you are GLREA members. However, if you're not, would love to have you join. So go to our website, glrea.org, and you'll see places to click so that you can join online. Would love to have you join if you haven't already. And I don't really know if I need to introduce Dale. Dale has done this presentation before a while back, and there still seems to be some confusion about time of use rates, which will probably, especially for us solar owners, be an issue for a long time to come. So with that, I'm going to start the screen sharing and turn it over to Dale.
Okay. So go ahead on to the second slide, I guess. And so while you're here, actually, so there's two links that are typed out here. If you want the full slides that we're looking at now, it's just the bit.ly time of day slides. If you want an even more detailed full document, there's this other link, time of day rates. And feel free to open those up and go through them separately or, follow along while we're going. So go to the next slide, please, John. The next slide is sort of
Don't seem to
so
be.
this is just a PDF document. You might need to say page up or page down to switch between pages, or you can scroll. That might do it too.
Page downward. Okay.
Okay, so this is what we're going to cover.
Those of you, please mute yourself during the presentation.
So this is what we're going to try and cover today real quick. Just a quick summary of, if you don't have any more time and energy to spend on it, here, just choose the rates that we recommend. I think that'll work good. We'll talk about some recent changes to legislation that don't really affect too much at all, really, what rate you would choose, but there's some solar related things that have changed. We'll go over some basic terminology about how to understand all the terms. We're going to talk about some history and background of why we have time of day rates or time of use rates, how you could save with the time of day, even if you don't have solar, depending on how much you're able to change your consumption behavior. You can also make some savings that way. Then we can talk specifically about DTE and consumers. That's about it. So go ahead to the next page, please. So see if you can make the page so they can see the plot and the rest of the stuff. So the short answer is, if you're on DTE, if you choose the D1.2, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. rate, that's probably going to be the best for you. Let's see, John, would you try to scroll up slightly so you can see the chart that's there a little bit more, so you can see the x-axis. Okay, that's perfect. There you go. So for consumers, for DTE, it's relatively significantly better to be on D1.2 because you get a better rate for any outflow that you have, and you get a better rate for any inflow you have off peak at night. Consumers, the rates are not that much different during the day when you're going to have some solar. There is some difference with the RPM nighttime savers rate is a lower rate overnight, at least for 7 hours, I think. So that one is worth choosing just for that. The the solar outflow during the day doesn't really make much difference. So I kind of already mentioned reasons why you might choose one of the rates, and this chart attempts to show you that. The solid blue line is how much inflow you would have from the grid at night, because your solar's not doing anything at night. And then if you didn't have solar during the day, the blue line, that's how much you'd be pulling in from the grid during the day. And the hour is across the bottom here. So midnight is on the left, noon is in the middle, and midnight again is over on the right. So the sun shines during the day. The green line is how much solar electricity your system might be producing. That happens during the day. And typically that'll be more than what your house uses during the day. So if you have any extra and it's going to go out to the grid as outflow, the rate that you get for it during that time matters. So those are the reasons why you'd be choosing one rate or the other. Go ahead, John, to the next slide, please. So here's a list of some things that have changed with the legislation. There was some energy bills that were passed and signed into law at the end of 2023, and they became effective at the beginning, like February 27th, I think I remember, of this year. So the things that changed here that matter quite a bit for solar customers and for solar installers and for renewable energy in general. This is not exhaustive list of what the legislation did. There were some other changes about renewable energy. This is just having to do with distributed generation for solar customers. The DG cap was raised quite a bit to 10% from 1%. It was also changed how that's defined. And so this means that there's no uncertainty, at least in the near term, the next few years at least, whether or not if you install a system, you'll be able to connect under the existing tariff. Before, the utilities were right at that limit, and people were concerned that any day the utility could say, no, I'm sorry, you can't hook up under the normal tariff, the normal rate, and we're going to stick you on some other awful rate that would give you no benefit for your solar. So that uncertainty has been removed, at least until we get to 10%. That's not likely going to happen for quite a few years. For example, Hawaii and California are on the order of like 20% currently solar generation. That's including utility scale solar too, I think. Michigan is way less. So it's going to be some number of years. So that's good. The limits on how big a system you can have were clarified. Some people would have trouble when they said, I want to have a system of whatever size, and the utility would hem and haw. Now you can have a system that will produce 110% of your previous usage. Previously, I think they said 100%, but it seemed to be a little bit up to the utility. So that helps. This next thing is kind of, I would say it's relatively minor, but depending on your case, it could let you save additional money. Previously, the credit that you earn for outflow, you could only use for power supply, not for delivery, and not for any other charges. Now, the way the law says, it can be applied to any other charges on the bill. So that's good. Consumers have already implemented this. DTE, as usual, has not done this yet. I think that they are supposed to at some point soon. The effect is that you might just use up your credit bank sooner. But if you have a large credit bank, a large system, then you might be able to use that to pay the rest of your bill also. There was a minor change, not so much, I don't think, in the legislation, but how one of the last rate cases turned out maybe. They now give credit for the full power supply rate, where previously they would subtract off a little bit, which was for transmission, which is long distance transmission. That is how how much they pay for electricity that they buy from far, far away, and they have to pay some for long distance transmission. Now, the power supply rate that we get credit for any outflow, it's the same as the power supply rate that you pay for inflow. This transmission component is not subtracted out. So any questions? We can go on to the next slide, I think. Okay, so here's some terminology. John, again, yeah, there you go, so that you can see the whole slide. You can let the title go off, so you can see the bottom of the slide. That's great, thanks. So this is sort of a cartoon of what your house might look like. Your house is on the right, and the different lines indicate how much power could be flowing either from the grid on the left. So anything that flows from the grid into your house, you call that inflow. That's the sort of bluish line in the middle. Anything that comes from your solar that you might have on site is first probably going to go on the orange line over to your house loads on the right. If you have a battery in your house and as part of your system, some of that might go to the bottom and charge the battery. And if there's any left over, then it might go out to the grid. So each one of these, it's sort of like everything sums up. Your house, everything that your house is using is going to be the sum of the three lines that are going to it. And then your battery, if you have some stored in your battery might run your house and discharge the battery, and you could avoid any inflow from the grid during that time. So that's one of the things that we talk about, we call self-consumption, or some call it behind the meter usage, or maybe some other terms for it. But self-consumption means if I produce energy from my solar and I use it directly in the house, that's called self-consumption. Or if you send it into your battery, that's self-consumption too, that you're kind of saving for later. Either way, you don't send it out to the grid. Anything you send out to the grid, you're going to get a certain credit for it now when you send it out, and then later you're going to have to pay whatever the cost is for electricity when you bring it back in. At least that's how distributed generation works. Net metering used to be whatever you send out, you can get the same number of kilowatt hours later. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Go ahead to the next slide. I think this is more terminology. So scroll down a little bit more. Like I started to talk about, if you're on distributed generation, the piggy bank that the utility keeps track of you with is in units of dollars. And so whatever you inflow, you pay dollars for it. And if you had some credit in your bank, in your piggy bank, they take it out as how many dollars. And so your inflow, if you do it at night, you're going to be buying off-peak electricity, which is less expensive. And so the amount that they take out of your piggy bank for that power supply is going to be a little bit less than if you took it out during the day, during on-peak times, where the power supply rate is higher. They'd be taking a larger amount out of your piggy bank, and they'll take out from your piggy bank, they'll take out distribution or delivery charges. Once Consumers has already set up their billing system this way. DTE hasn't yet, but they're supposed to, from what I understand. And then any outflow that you have, it depends on when you outflow it. If you outflow it on peak, which the good thing about solar and time of day rates generally is that the time of day rates are higher in the middle of the day or the afternoon. Generally, you may have some excess solar during that time, and you can get a higher rate for it during that time. Your outflow on weekends, the sun still shines on weekends, and sadly, your outflow on weekends would be less valuable because it's off peak. Have I covered everything on this slide here? So yeah, I think so. So now go ahead to the next slide, and this one talks about if you were still net metered. Generally, if you had a system that was installed before 2019 with DTE, sometime up until like May 2019, or sometime in 21 with consumers, your system is still net metered. And you get to keep that system for 10 years. So if this is 2024, if you installed your system before 2014, you're going to be losing net metering sometime about now. And you'll get converted to distributed generation. So with net metering, the piggy bank that they would have is in units of kilowatt hours. So if you send out 1 kilowatt hour, okay, you've got another kilowatt hour in your piggy bank. And if you use a kilowatt hour, you take out 1 kilowatt hour from your piggy bank. It used to be very simple when you just had a flat rate, the same price all the time. But with a time of day rate, there's different buckets. There's different times. There's summer and winter, peak and off peak. And that's assuming you had one of the default rates, or there's some time of day rates that have 6 different time periods. So even worse, you'd have 6 buckets. And each bucket is only good for that time period. So for example, summertime on peak is when you might have the most outflow, and that piggy bank gets full because usually you're sending it out during that time. And then when you need to use some of that electricity at night, that's a different piggy bank, and that one's empty because you don't send anything out at night. That's the difficulty with net metering and time of use rate. However, I've heard, I believe that if you call up DTE at least, and maybe consumers also, and ask them to just credit your account for the value of that bank that you're unable to use because you don't really have any usage during that time, during the summer peak times, that your bucket just gets full. And they'll show on your bill how many dollars is that worth, but previously it just keeps adding up on your bill. You can, if you have that problem, you can call them and ask them. They would probably just credit your account for that, zero out that bank. That would also happen whenever you change rates, because those piggy banks don't apply to you anymore. You're on a different rate now. So if you end net metering, they'll cash it out, or if you call them, they'll cash it out, or if you change to a different rate, they'll cash out also. And it'll be a credit in dollars on your bill, and then that would be good for sending whatever, for spending for whatever charges are on your bill. It'll probably go towards the monthly service charge. It'll go towards all the other charges on there, as far as I know. The question in the chat for DTE is the excess generation bank. Yes, that's what I mean by piggy bank. Someone saying the bit.ly links do not work. The case matters, so it's capital TOD dash capital slides or capital TOD dash capital rates. So try that again. I'm pretty sure they work. I checked them earlier. I'm looking back through the chat to see anything else. Yeah, okay, I think that's it for now. Any questions so far? All right, go ahead to the next slide then. And so another question, Eric Max, about excess generation bank. I don't know if you can use charges from the electric to pay for natural gas. I would recommend asking. I'm not sure they would do that, but I don't know. I kind of doubt it, but I'm really only speculating. So, so here, this next slide is a little bit of history and background about why do we have time of day rates. The 2016 energy legislation is what got rid of net metering and said that we need to have distributed generation and we need to have cost of service based rates. That's what got us distributed generation. It also said that the utilities had to do more about demand response and energy waste reduction programs, which includes having time of day rates. The problem with, well, there's no one problem with utilities. A problem with utilities is that they would be happy to continue building more and more capacity to serve, a couple of hours, a couple of days a year when the load is the highest. That's what happens typically in Michigan. Typically is summer will have some peak loads. The further we go on into the future, eventually, and it has happened once, at least in Michigan, where we had system peaks that were high in the wintertime. But that's going to change very slowly over time. Anything that can be done to reduce loads at those peaks scroll down a little tiny bit more, John, please, avoids the utility being allowed to build more big power plants. If they just have flat rates, they love it because every time they get everybody to use a little bit more, they get to build another power plant. Actually, over time, maybe the last 10 years or so, the system loads in Michigan or the total sales of electricity are decreasing. The utilities don't like that because energy waste reduction. People are starting to use less energy because of things like LED light bulbs and heat pumps, and everybody probably also responding a little bit to their electricity rates. So anyway, time of day was one of the things. Time of day rates is one of the things that's kind of required to do that. I think there's also maybe some federal FERC requirements to do that. So that's why they've done it. And they were required to make it the new default rate. Because if you don't make it the default rate, nobody's going to choose it, especially if the utility is not really encouraging anybody. So I kind of already said everything that's on this slide. If you can shift any loads to off-peak, that reduces the demand on the system. And the utilities don't really like it because it reduces some need for them to build new power plants. This is sort of a geeky slide. It might be too much detail, but this plot shows each dot is a utility with a certain set of rates, time of day rates, and what was the ratio of their peak to their off-peak ratio, and how much impact that had on reducing the peaks. And DTE's rates and Consumers Energy, I always pick on DTE because that's my utility, but both of them, they have rates that have a not very big difference between peak and off-peak. And that is the least effective that they can have. And the utilities would choose that because they don't want anybody to reduce their consumption, because they want to still build more capacity because they make money that way. And every rate case, at least DTE I've plotted and looked at, they move it to a lower, less effective rate every time, because they want to make it not so painful for people to use energy during the day when they would like the excuse to build more capacity. If you're into this kind of thing, you should please contact the Public Service Commission and learn about this and talk to them about it. They really should be having rates that move to the right, a higher peak to off-peak ratio. That would help us for solar because any excess that we have, you get better credit for it during the day on peak when the rest of the grid really needs it. Okay, go ahead to the next one, please. Okay, so, and again, yeah, try to slide up a little bit so that the arrows at the bottom. So how you would choose a rate, you want to choose a rate based on how it aligns with your solar outflow and how it aligns with when you still use energy from the grid. So the top plot kind of already explained. The middle plot is what your inflow and outflow might look like on a summer day. At night, and this is if you didn't have a battery. If you at nighttime and you don't have a battery, you're probably still going to have inflow from the grid during that time. You might charge your electric car during that time. You might run your heat pump in the wintertime, overnight when it's the coldest, and you're going to pay whatever rate at night. And so the inflow rate is what's going to matter during the time. There is an outflow rate during off-peak at night, but it doesn't matter because your system's not going to be making any outflow during that time. Your system would be making outflow sometime during the middle of the day. And so that's when the outflow rate might matter. The sets of arrows at the bottom, there's 2 for DTE and 1 for consumers. The recommended rate for DTE is the 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. rate because it has a wider on-peak rate time period from 11 a.m. all the way to 7 p.m. And most of your solar outflow is probably going to occur sometime in the earlier afternoon. By later afternoon, it's already starting to go down because your house, you might have come home and you might be using a little more, but also the sun is starting to go down. If you chose the DTE default rate, this is what what everybody gets switched to if you don't say anything. If you were on the flat rate before, you're on the D111, 3 to 7 p.m. rate. So the peak time starts at 3 p.m. and goes to 7 p.m. So the rate is a little bit higher during that time, but it's not so great because that's when your production is already starting to decrease. And the same with consumers. It's already starting to, like 2 p.m. is better than 3 p.m., but it's not, it would be great if it would be great from a solar energy perspective for, individual customers. It'd be great if it was an earlier time period like DTEs, but there's not really any choice. Consumers have the same time period for all the rates, and the on-peak time rate, the rate during the day is the same anyway. It doesn't matter what you choose. The only difference is that the night rate is a little bit different on one of them. So that's the basic idea of how you would choose one over the other. So go ahead. Next, I think, is a slide about DTE and their rates specifically. So scroll down. Yep, there you go. That's good. So the top plot we've looked at already. The middle plot shows the inflow rates and the outflow rates by the hour of the day. And there's actually 4, there's summer and winter. And then there's only 5 weekdays that the peak rate applies. The rest of the time, weekends, is all off peak. So the lines that are plotted here are weighted by the number of summer and winter months and how many week or weekdays there are. So, for example, the red line up here, this is the inflow rate for the default rate. And this is if you took the average of, how many winter months are there? And because the DT, like I think one of them has 4 summer months, the other one has 5 summer months. D1.2 has 5 months in the summer period. The default one has only 4 months. So this is a way of just comparing apples to apples, all the rates, without getting into so many details of is it summer or winter. So the summer rates are higher than this line, the winter are a little bit lower. But if you make this simplification just to make kind of a more basic comparison, that's what's plotted here. So what's going to matter are the red areas. That's off-peak times, and it's the inflow rates. The solid lines are inflow. The dotted dashed lines are the outflow compensation that you get. The difference between them is just the distribution charge, which is a flat rate for DTE is something like 8 something cents now. And so what matters for during the day is what your outflow rate would be. That's the green area that's circled. So you could look at this middle plot and say, all right, which one has the lowest inflow rate when it matters? Which one has the highest outflow rate when it matters? And that's D 1.2. If you go to the next kind of level of detail, you could say for a theoretical, hypothetical inflow and outflow that you might have for a given day, that's the top plot. Multiply that number of kilowatts in each hour times the rate in cents per kilowatt hour or dollars per kilowatt hour, and you get the plot at the bottom. So looking at this one, D 1.2 and D 1.8, they both have the lowest overnight inflow cost. The only difference between those is that D 1.2 has 8 hours. I'm sorry, D 1.2 has 16 hours of off-peak rate. So in the evening, over on the right-hand side here, there's a difference between the green and the yellow. The green is D 1.2, but D 1.8 still has the mid-peak period during this time. D 1.8 has 3 different time periods in the day. It has a peak from 2 p.m. 3 p.m. It has from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. is on peak. And then from 7 p.m. until midnight, I think, is mid-peak. It's not that cheap. It's the same price as everybody else is paying. But D 1.2 during that time is less expensive. So for me, I have a heat pump, and at 7 p.m., I can go ahead and start using heat pump energy from the grid all the way around till 11 a.m. D 1.2 has the lowest, has a low inflow rate. Yes, D 1.8 is a little bit lower during this time period, but it's not nearly as much time. So that's also one reason why I personally chose D 1.2. I think that's about it. So the area under the curve is what matters for your outflow compensation. So D 1.2 is good because it has a larger time period here. All right, go ahead to the next one is about consumers. And here, the same idea in terms of how you might look at these plots and how you might sort of qualitatively be choosing between the different rates. I would call consumers if I was a customer, and I would call Public Service Commission. I would write them a comment. One of the requirements is that there's supposed to be rate optionality. There's supposed to be different rates that they offer that offer some sort of flexibility for customers. So if you're a certain type of customer, you might choose this rate, or vice versa. DTE has that in their time of day rates. Consumers does really not have much difference there. There's no significant difference in their outflow or their inflow compensation, their inflow cost during the day. Because when you plot the rates, they're the same. After you normalize them for how many months there are, that they're summer or winter. And so I would complain about that. The one rate does have a little bit lower inflow rate for 7 hours overnight. So this is still good if you would charge an electric car, or if you have a battery and you in like wintertime and your system is big enough to mostly run your house most of the time off of the battery. Then this 7 hours might be enough for you to, charge your battery during that time to get you back up full. And then you'd be able to make it through some of the peak time during the day. Or you could do some heating with a heat pump, but the 7 hours is not that great. So the only reason to recommend the RPM rate, they call it nighttime savers, is the off-peak, a little bit lower cost. I don't think there's going to be any significant difference if you have solar choosing a rate based on one of the other ones.
Hey, Tim.
The green one is very slightly higher during this time.
So, term sheet's interesting.
All right, was that a question or somebody just talking in the background there?
Well, I mean, like, some of it's just, it's absolutely unreasonable, but, you know, I mean, it's really more, what do you, I mean, you know, they're upping you 50,000 cash and what is it, 2.5%?
Yeah, John, I think that's somebody just talking.
Criteria. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Figure out how to mute,
But then the part that,
mute that guy, James Meyer.
what,
Okay. So there was a couple other questions on the chart.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
hey, James Meyer, would you mute, please?
yeah, I don't know what they're doing. And then on top of that, they put all these caps on all of the payables. I mean, we've incurred higher, you know.
Hey, James Meyer.
I mean, it's just, the whole thing is just, it's just ridiculous.
Jeez.
It's a ridiculous offer.
Yeah, John,
I think
if you
the
can mute
organizer
him,
can mute him. The organizer, whoever that is, can mute
just
him.
pull up in the participants and okay. All right, so there were a couple of questions in the chat I'll try to answer. How do you know what D rate I'm on? You can look at your bill, and at the top of the section it'll say time of day. And there, I don't know, just read what it says there and ask. Yeah, okay, so time of day 3 to 7, or it might say time of day 11 to 7 is for D 1.2. Okay, all right, that explains it right there. Okay. If you're currently on I think you're probably on D 1.11, Carol Fletcher. To get changed to D 1.2, you call DTE and ask them to switch you. There's a number on one of these slides further on. Why don't you go to the next slide, John?
Seem to be
Yeah,
having a
go to the
hard
next
time.
slide, please, John Sarver, when you get a second.
Yeah. Having a hard time.
So I'll type this, the phone number for DTE, they have a solar number. It's 1-800 800-482-8720, and then you say option number 4. You wait for the menu and press number 4. And that will that should get you to a person that's knowledgeable and would have you switch, you tell them that you want to switch to D 1.2, the 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. rate. In the past, and this was like a year or so ago, they would attempt to tell you, oh, you can't because you have solar, and that's a load of it. So you just tell them, no, I'm sorry, you're incorrect. I know that I can be on any one of the available rates, and D 1.2 and D 1.8 are both available for DG customers. If you're still net metered, you're only you can have D 1.2, but you cannot have D 1.8 if you're net metered. And you probably wouldn't want it anyway because of the bucket issue that we talked about before. So another one was in the questions, Betsy said, if we have a battery and use power from the battery most of the evening, for cost saving mode or just in general, would you still want D 1.2? I think yes. I'm on D 1.2. If you have a battery, what you can do is avoid using anything from the grid during the on-peak time, depending on how your system is set up. But probably if you have a battery, you can set up your system, you can program it so that during the day, you avoid using anything from the grid. If your battery and your inverters are big enough, you can kind of have your house off the grid during that time, as long as your battery is full enough. If your battery gets empty, then you could start pulling energy from the grid. And then if you want to be more, if you want to cycle your battery a little bit more, you could then have your battery charge back up from the grid anytime overnight if you think it's not going to get charged up on solar. So in the wintertime, say. So I generally do operate my system that way. All right, so that number, it's typed into the chat a couple times there. All right.
But Dale, I
So-
can't seem to get to the 13th slide for some reason.
Okay, well, there was on the last slide anyway is only just questions, and which one of them was the number to call if you're DTE and you want to switch rates. We just talked about that and put that in the chat. The second thing was if you have any questions, go ahead and stick them in the chat or raise your hand. In the meantime, I'll keep reading through this final slide, which is just some other, I called it homework. And my first homework was call DTE and switch, or call consumers and switch. I haven't really heard a lot about consumers giving people, hassling any solar customers when they want to switch to a different rate. I haven't heard about that. DTE, I heard a lot about it, and I experienced it myself. Michael Hagan, you have your hand up. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I asked the question, how can I tell what rate I'm on? My bill says R18 Cat 1, time of day 3 to 7.
Yep, so that is D1.11, and the 3 to 7 means it's the peak time period is 3 to 7. So that
I could
is,
switch it to 1.2.
yes, you could switch that to 1.2, and I don't know, what is your system like? Do you have, does your system mostly offset your usage, or is it?
It more than offsets. My house is net zero at the end of the year. I
Yeah.
produce more electricity than I use. I've not pulled anything off the grid since April. And on the average month, April, May, June, July, and August, I'm sending DTE between 300 and 800 kilowatts. But
Yep.
every single day, they charge me a 0.1 kilowatt. What is that?
0.1. Well, I don't know. Depending on how your system is set up, you might still be pulling some energy from the grid sometimes, just for a short time. Because the meter's bidirectional, and it it doesn't really spin, but it spins one way when you're flowing out, and it counts up that. If even for an instant, a couple of seconds, there's some flow that comes in, it counts that up too. And it doesn't usually add up to anything, but eventually it will, or it could be a rounding error or two. And the other kind of comical thing, I think, that I've seen, sometime in the last year, they've changed their billing so it shows like 4 digits of kilowatt hours, decimal places, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
They can't measure that, but their system is doing it. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about that small amount, but yeah, switch to D1.2 and you'll get more credit that way, and anything that you might use overnight. Yeah.
Well, I have batteries. I don't use anything at night.
Well, how about in the wintertime though?
Oh, in the wintertime, yeah.
Yeah. So in the wintertime, you'll be, yeah, it'll work better. Trust me. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So that sounds a lot like my system, where I have enough solar that like 3/4 of the year I couldn't care less if the grid was there, except that what would I do with all the extra? And so it goes out to the grid, but I try as much as I can to charge the car whenever it's sunny, especially off peak. So weekends, the car gets charged all the way up on the weekends, and then all the week during the week, I usually don't charge it because it's already full, or it's not at home. And I can still, any extra can still go out to the grid for a reasonable credit. But then in the wintertime, that doesn't work that way, and I still have to charge the car from the grid. sometimes, and the house, I need to run from the grid off peak. I pull energy only off peak, even though I'm heating the house with heat pumps. I have a system that's got some kind of marginal amount of thermal storage because it's got it's hydronic, so there's two large tanks of water that get heated up, and even though even during the day, during peak time, I might want to use energy from the grid if it's cloudy out. I don't really have to because there's not as much heating need, and the water is still warm from earlier. So, any other questions? So, another recommendation then is after switching your rates, you could call and ask the utility to do a comparison of your rates based on your previous usage. There's a requirement in the rate book that they're supposed to be able to do something like that, but they never do. They just hand wave and say, oh, what kind of usage do you have? Okay, you might want to be on this rate. What I expect them to do is to use your hourly data and do an actual comparison of your cost based on your usage, your inflow and outflow. That would be good for them to do. So anyway, if you want a hobby, call up the utility and try to get them to do that. I haven't been successful, but if people ask them, that might help. You can download your usage data and you can do it in a spreadsheet yourself. There is a detailed tool, and I'm going to copy and paste it into the chat now. This is you call it an 8760 analysis because there's 8760 hours in a year. And so you could put in a spreadsheet, what was your inflow or outflow for each hour of the year, and then what are the different rates that you have available. So this is a spreadsheet that Reuven Gevarahu, and apologize if I said your last name correctly, Reuven, but this has DTE's current rates in it. And all you basically have to do is paste in your solar production and your house usage, some combination of that information, that data, and then the spreadsheet will basically spit out for you the cost if you are on the different rates. This is also something that a solar installer should do for you if you're getting a system installed, because you would ask them, well, what would it work like if I had a bigger battery or a smaller battery or no battery, and if I chose these different rates, or if I made some other changes. That's the type of analysis that you might like to do.
I'm sorry, Dale, did you say you posted that in the chat?
Yeah, in the chat. Yep. So it's a bit.ly link, bit.ly/DTE_8760. And yeah, does everybody see that in the chat? Oh,
No.
Shucks. I'm sorry, guys. I was going to just one person in the chat. Sorry about that. The same with the phone number that I posted before. Sorry about that. All right, there's the link. All right, so any other questions?
I guess that's it. We got a few more minutes left. If anybody does have some questions, Abraham, go ahead.
Abraham, you're still muted, I think.
Right. I come through now. All right.
Yep.
I have there's an organization which is trying to get us the direct access back to the AMI, the meter. That's called Mission Data. And they are mounting a campaign along with a bunch of companies to actually get direct real-time access to the data outflow of that of the meter. And I have some information about that, which I will send your way. But I think that is an interesting effort, given that, especially given that in the past, a whole number of these meters, all there because of our federal tax dollars, had the Zigbee protocol as part of its meter, so that you could actually get the real-time data directly out of it. Interestingly, a whole number of utilities have turned that protocol off, so you cannot get to it. But there is a group that is now trying to get that access back and actually make this widely known. And I'll send you a podcast about that from an organization called Volts, but the organization itself is called Mission Data.
That's very interesting. I would be interested in that personally. One thing related to that I would add, DTE, I think you can still get it. I'm not sure, as an energy bridge that will connect to your meter. I've had it for quite a few years now, and it's called the Energy Bridge, and it's from a company in Ohio. I can't remember the name now, but some utilities have that thing.
Yeah, I have that, but I am not aware that you can actually get the real-time data.
Yep.
In a data stream out of that. Are you able to?
Yeah. So with the Energy Bridge, there is a MQTT server on the Energy Bridge, at least on mine. I don't know if they've taken it away by now or not, but if you go to the IP address, do you have my email? You can email me later and I can explain, or,
Okay.
but and I have to leave this room at the library right about now too. There's an MQTT server on it.
Okay.
I forget the port, but you go to the IP address of whatever
Right.
your Energy Bridge is on your network.
Right.
And I forget if there's a username and password that you have to have for it or not, but if you email me.
Okay.
Dale, are you aware of the DTE Insight app that also gives you're aware of that, right, Dale?
Yeah, so that is what works with the Energy Bridge, at least if you have the Energy Bridge. They also, the Insight app lets you see your data in a lower resolution format from their servers. But if you have the Energy Bridge, you can see data down to every 3 seconds, I think it is. And with that MQTT server that's built into it, at least if you have some home automation,
Right.
hobbyist sort of stuff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It sounds like you're leaving the library, Dale. Thank you very
it's-
much for the presentation. These
Oh,
are
wait.
always-
One final
Yeah.
thing. Dale, can you give your email address so if people have follow-up questions, they can contact you?
It's right in the chat here.
Perfect.
It's dalklein@gmail.com.
Oops.
Thank you.
Looks like Dale froze there on his way out of the library. Yeah,
So-
yeah. Are
Here
you
it
still
is.
there, Dale?
I don't know.
Anyway,
Need to clear up their rooms.
yeah. Thank you, Dale. That was very helpful. We'll have to bring you back again at some point because, boy, there are a lot of questions come up with these time of use rates, and they can definitely be confusing. John Freeman, do you have anything you'd like to announce or say before we call it a night?
No, I just want to thank Dale and thank everybody for joining us. I think this is very helpful. It is confusing. Dale is an incredible resource. We're recording this. So you can access it on our YouTube page, and and I would encourage you all to get the slides from the bit.ly source, so you can look at Dale's slides more at your leisure. And then, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to contact Dale. He's always been incredibly willing to talk to people one-on-one. So, thanks.